there, it's Sandee Sgarlata. Get ready to dive deep into incredible stories of people who've taken life's challenges and turned them into a roadmap to happiness. On this show, we're not just talking about overcoming obstacles. We're uncovering the real, gritty secrets to living a life filled with peace, joy, and genuine happiness. This is Happiness Solved. So let's get started, because happiness is a choice, and the choice is yours. Hello, Teshna. Such a great pleasure to see you again. How's everything going today?
Very good, very good. It's a beautiful day here in
Good.
the shore.
Yeah. So we had such an amazing conversation a few weeks ago, and I'm so excited to bring your knowledge to my audience. So you started out as a chiropractor.
Yes.
Which is awesome. But since then, you've moved on and you're doing really amazing things. I want you to share with the audience your story and, just give us your backstory and then how you got to where you are today. And then we can dive into everything that you do.
Okay. Well, so I'm originally from Quebec, Canada. So I'm French Canadian. That's my first language is French. Growing up, my mother and I had a lot of issues because my mother was very critical and she was having issues with being nervous and anxious and getting angry easily and all that kind of thing. And she kept hoping she could improve herself. And she actually wrote me a letter that I actually found just 3 years ago. When I was 14, she wrote me this letter, how she was trying to improve herself and she couldn't. No matter how hard she tried, she couldn't change. And I was like, oh my God, this is like exactly why I'm doing what I'm doing now, is because I want to give this tool to anyone. You don't have to be a practitioner. You don't have to be a coach or a therapist or anything. You can just be a regular person. You can be a mom and learn how to do this and calm yourself down so you can have better relationship with your kids and help your kids too. And so anyway, so that's kind of how it started for me. It's like searching for answers because there's a lot of difficulties growing up. And then I ended up going to chiropractic college after having an amazing experience with a chiropractor myself, because I had an injury in gymnastics because I was a phys ed major, and I fell from a headstand onto my upper back right there, and it really hurt myself. And to make a long story short, ending up at a chiropractor because the medical profession couldn't help me. They basically told me it was all in my head because my blood pressure was perfect, my blood was perfect, and my urine test was perfect. So since they couldn't find anything wrong with me, and I had pain right here and right here every time I took a breath in, it had to be in my head. So I said, well, maybe it's all in my head, but it hurts right here and right here every time I take a breath in. It didn't used to do that. So there's got to be a reason for this. So I kept searching, and I went to my yoga class, and I was trying to stretch it and everything. And one of my friends in the class said that, I didn't look myself. So after the class, she came to me, she says, what's going on? And I said, well, I told her what happened. And she said, well, why don't you go see a chiropractor? Like, it was the most obvious thing in the world. But this is a long time ago. This is back in 1980. And, I was young and I didn't know anything about chiropractic. And in Quebec, nobody knew anything about chiropractic. To make a long story short again, I ended up going to see him, and he completely transformed my life. In 2 weeks, I was completely pain-free. And I was like, wow, I have to become a chiropractor because I want to be able to help other people the way he just helped me. So I went to chiropractic college in Davenport, Iowa at Palmer College back in 1983. That's a long time ago. And there I started learning techniques like applied kinesiology, which is the science of muscle testing the whole entire body. And not just for yes, no answers, because that wasn't even a thought back then, because muscle testing had been discovered by Dr. George Goodhart in 1977 or 1976, something like that. So it was brand new in 83. Nobody knew anything about muscle testing. So I've always been a trailblazer at everything, and that was no different. So I started doing muscle testing back then. And then in 1984, there was an international conference of applied kinesiology in which doctors who had been learning applied kinesiology could share their application of applied kinesiology with their clientele. And this particular man, Dr. Roger Callahan, was a psychologist, and he is the father of tapping. He presented in 1984 for the very first time the idea of tapping on meridian points to release stuck emotions. And I happened to be there in 1984 listening to this guy, and I started tapping right then and there for myself and started to doing it with my patients and everything. And so that was quite a breakthrough, for that time. And then in 1987, I was at another international conference of total body modification, which is an advanced form of applied kinesiology. And at that conference, Dr. Scott Walker, who is the father of neuro-emotional technique, presented for the very first time his technique, allowing the idea that emotions affect physical body, specific pains and emotions, and how they link together, and that if you release the emotion, you can actually help the body with physical pain. And so I love this technique, and I took all his trainings and I became certified in neuroemotional technique. It's a fabulous technique. However, it's only open to practitioners. You have to be a doctor of chiropractic or a dentist or a psychologist or somebody like that in order to be able to take the training. And I wanted to come up with something that I could teach my patients so they could help themselves with their daily stresses and nervousness and anxiety, just like my mother had, right? And so I started putting together a training, a short training, to teach my patients how to do a form of tapping that is not like EFT. It's different, it's shorter, and it really works well. And so I started teaching it then. Also, I took a training in NLP, and I became a master NLP practitioner, in addition to all these other things, plus many other techniques. And then over the years, I just put all these things together in ways that made it more and more effective. And to this point where we can really clear a limiting belief in less than 1 minute, and we can install a positive belief in its place in less than 1 minute. And then also how to clear any kind of stress, usually within 15 minutes, and phobias, addictions, PTSD, allowing people to really forgive on all levels, which is really difficult for most people to do. Like when you've been hurt by someone, it's hard to forgive if you just come from up here, because it's locked into the body as well. The whole physiology repeats itself every time you think about that person, right? So it's really hard to let go. But with MTT, which is what I call the technique, it's meridian therapy and tapping, you can do that very effectively and very quickly. And I lead groups on Sundays to do that.
Incredible, incredible. So MTT is the modality that you created, if you will, by putting all of this knowledge, decades of experience and training and certifications, you put it all together to create MTT, which
That's
is
correct.
That sounds, it sounds so incredible. Oh my gosh, you just unpacked so much wisdom that we can dive into. So yeah, chiropractic. I think I remember telling you that because of, being a figure skater, I had major back issues, and I still to this day go to a chiropractor, and it's just absolutely incredible because there are certain things that are trapped in the body. And by doing the adjustments, you do feel that release. That all makes sense. It's very concrete, right? Chiropractic care has been it's now insurance covers it. You don't even have to get a referral from my insurance. I don't have to get a referral. So I think people are really in tune and accepting of chiropractic care, right? Wouldn't you agree? Yeah. Now, can you just dive into a little bit more when you're talking about, because you talked about meridian. Can you explain what that means? Let's start there, because I don't know if many of the listeners will be familiar with that terminology.
So basically, in Chinese medicine, or 5,000 years ago, they discovered these lines of energy that are running through our bodies that relate to specific organs, and they call them meridians. That's the name of those lines of energy. So, for example, we have a liver meridian, we have a stomach meridian, we have a kidney meridian, and so forth. So all the major organs have a meridian related to them. And each of these meridians have very specific points that are related to them. And so along those meridian lines, there are different points. For example, kidney meridian starts underneath the foot, on the sole of the foot, kind of like in the middle of the sole of the foot, and it goes all the way up to right here underneath the collarbones. And so the first point down at the foot is kidney 1, and this one is kidney 27, and that's the end of the meridian that's related with the kidneys. And each meridian is like that in the body. Now, the other thing that's interesting is that each one of these meridians or organs relationship also relate to different emotion, very specific emotions. And this was also discovered 5,000 years ago. For example, the liver has to do with anger. The lungs have to do with grief, and so forth. Each meridian relates to different emotions. And so in between what Dr. Callahan came up with, what Dr. Scott Walker came up with what I came up with, and many other people, I put these things together in a way that's simplified so that you don't need to be a doctor of any kind to learn this. It's very simple. Anybody can do it. It's a step-by-step process. And you literally empty out the charge out of each of those meridians relating to a specific event or issue or person.
Interesting. Can you give us maybe an example of somebody that you've worked with and explain how you helped to release that, doing the techniques that you do?
Yes. So basically, when you said that, what came to my mind is I had a couple, they were grandparents, and one of their grandchild got hit by a car and killed. So they were devastated, and they had been patients of mine for a while, and they came in because they knew I could help them with the emotional aspect of things. And when they came in, they were so devastated. Like you can just imagine, right? Like having your grandchild being killed. And that was recent. I think that happened the day before, or that kind of thing. And so I was able to take them from their stress level being over 1 million, like when I test them, like my level of stress about, my grandchild, whatever the name was, being killed in a car accident is less than 10. And they went weak on that. And less than 100, they went weak on that. Less than 1 million, they went weak on that. So using muscle testing, you can find out very specifically what the subconscious is feeling. Okay, so, and each muscle test that you do gives you direct access to that. So and the body doesn't lie. So as long as you're not switched.
The body keeps the score, right? There's a book. The body keeps the score.
Absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely. And the body doesn't lie. So if you test somebody and they have a strong muscle to begin with, and then you have them say something like, my level of stress about losing my grandchild to a car accident like that is less than 10. If they go weak, that means they're not agreeing with that statement. No. So then that's when I kept going. Okay. And it wasn't less than 1 million. I could have kept going. So then I started using pulse points on the wrist, right here, these pulse points. There's a point 1, 2, and 3, right like that, and point 0 right there. Yeah. And I have them hold the points and hold the forehead. This is something that comes from applied kinesiology as well as neuroemotional technique. Right? Yeah. So basically what I do is I have them hold the points from this direction. So you're putting
the points are on the side of the thumb.
Exactly. So that you're holding it like this. Yep, right on the pulses. And then I would have them just hold one of them. Let's say the first one. And then I would have them put their hand on their forehead flat, because there's actually neurovascular reflexes on the forehead that have to do with emotions. And then I would tell them which emotion to let go of. In this case, with the first point on the right, it has to do with the lungs. So I had them release the feeling of grief and sadness and crying and anguish and cloudy thinking and feeling defensive about this happening to them and yearning to still have their grandchild with them, and feeling dogmatic that this should never have happened, right? That kind of thing. So, and so forth. So then I just had them release all of that. And then I retested them after they finished releasing it. And now their stress was lower. Instead of testing weak on less than 1 million, they were strong on that. But then they were weak on less than 1,000. So then I went to the next point and did the same thing with the next point and released those emotions and so forth, until I did all 6 main points with all the emotions that are related to each one. And then at the end of that, their level of stress was less than 1. So, it doesn't mean that they didn't care, that they didn't remember. They still remembered, but they weren't devastated. They were able to be at peace with it. That's what was meant to be right now. No, there's nothing they can do about it. They couldn't change it. They just had to become at peace with what was, so to speak. So that's just
yeah, and I'm so sad for those for that couple to have to experience that. It's just the unthinkable. So I want to come back to muscle testing in a second because I want you to dive into that a little bit more. But let's finish up this. So you were able to, through your technique, through MTT, you were able to help reduce the grief that they were feeling and the stress because of the grief. How does that work in terms of, because, my older brother died when I was, 2 weeks before my 13th birthday. And actually the anniversary is coming up of his death. It's coming up in less than a week. And that was, 1978. And, the body remembers that trauma. So I'm now at a place, because it's been over 40 years, I'm now at a place where, I can look at it with neutrality, but for decades, it was still very deep, raw wound. Does this technique, like by doing this technique and using this couple as an example, when they lost their grandchild had just been killed, is that gone forever, or is it going to keep coming up, and that they have to kind of work on this on a continuing basis? Like that's the one thing that I'm just curious about, because people spend decades and decades and decades removing and dealing with trauma.
Exactly. In my experience, once you clear the stress on a one particular event, it's gone forever, because you're releasing all the stuck energy out of each meridian, and they no longer have the charge. You no longer have the physiological charge. I've worked with a lot of people with PTSD that had like horrific things happen to them, and it's completely gone. It's completely gone. Sometimes if it's a very severe PTSD, you may have to do like 2 or 3 sessions, but it's not about the same thing. It's about a different aspect of it. Whatever it is that we cleared is cleared, and we never have to go back to that. But there might be many layers to it. So then we need to address those layers. But very rarely does it take more than 2 or 3 sessions to get rid of something pretty big,
That's incredible.
Yes.
Yeah, that's really incredible. And I know that there's a lot of different techniques out there, and I had worked on clearing, childhood trauma, and it, and I am open as there is. I mean, I've been talking about all this woo-woo stuff for decades, and I believe it, but there's still always that one, it's that part of our brain that, likes to doubt things. Is that really true? And for me, in my experience with clearing these things is that, time will tell, right?
Exactly.
And I know for me, when any sort of memory, like things come up that normally would have triggered me and sent me down a rabbit hole for, usually I'm able to handle things and deal with it, and I can, snap myself out of, situations and whatnot. But I truly can say that after the work that I've done, which is very similar, it's another, just another technique, I really do look at things with neutrality. And that's where we want it to be, right? Mm-hmm. Because the memories are going to still come up. Yes. The thoughts of that person that passed, or what, that's still going to come up. And there's no emotion attached to it anymore. That's the incredible part of it.
Exactly.
Yeah. Being able to look at things with neutrality.
Yes. Yeah. I was just thinking of another patient that I worked with, and actually she's a student of mine because I teach these trainings online. And this woman had a phobia of vomit since she was like 6 years old, and she's 50 now. She had tried everything to get rid of that phobia, and it was severe. Like if she saw somebody vomit, she could pass out, and then she would have PTSD for at least 2 weeks and couldn't sleep for at least 2 or 3 nights. And she wouldn't let people in her car because she was worried that they would vomit. They get car sick and vomit. She would have to leave parties early because she was worried people would get drunk and start vomiting. So it was creating issues with her relationship because her husband didn't want to leave early, but she did, and so on. So that it was totally like affecting her life in so many ways. And so she was taking my training. I teach a 3-day training. She was in my training, and one of the things I teach is how to help people with phobias. So I asked for a volunteer. So she volunteered. And then she told me about this phobia, and she couldn't even write the word vomit. She couldn't even write it, right? And so it was pretty severe. So in 15 minutes, I helped her get rid of that lifelong phobia. So
We're
then,
chuckling here. No,
right,
I just want to take a moment. We are chuckling here because, and I want to just, it's no disrespect to her and that phobia, because for her, like, while we may think, oh, that, you know, how can you have a phobia about that? But in her mind, it's real. And it's a real serious thing that was causing her a lot of pain, I'm sure. So
it did.
please continue.
Yeah. So again, so at the end of the clearing, she was completely fine with it. She was able to write the word vomit. She didn't have any stress on it. When I had her remember the different places where she was having so much stress before, she didn't have any stress. So then we had to wait for the proof in the pudding, right? So a month later, she was invited to a wedding. So she goes to the wedding, and normally she would have wanted to leave early, but she didn't. And she saw that a lot of the young people were drinking a lot, and she knew somebody's going to be vomiting at some point. But
Somebody's going to get sick.
she was fine. She was just talking with whoever she was next to at the table and everything. And then lo and behold, a woman does vomit on the table right next to where she was. And she just looked at her with no stress whatsoever and just thinking, feeling bad for her that she's vomiting, but not feeling any stress. She didn't feel compelled to leave or anything like that. That night when she went home, she slept like a baby, didn't have any PTSD. And it's been like this now for 2 years.
Geez, what kind of wedding is she going to? I mean, I've never seen anybody throw up at a wedding. I guess I'm not at the right ones.
That funny? I guess she said it was like a young couple. So they had all these young
Yeah.
people and it was free
Yeah.
alcohol. So like
Yep.
people were just drinking and drinking and drinking, and that's what happened.
Oh my goodness. All right. So let's circle back to muscle testing, because I want to make sure that people understand what that means. And I'll have you show your fingers so you can demonstrate it. You won't be able to see that if you're listening, but you can hop over to my YouTube channel and watch the video. So can you explain muscle testing and do just a short demonstration?
So obviously muscle testing can be done on any main muscles of the body and even a smaller one. So when I teach it, I teach people how to do it with their fingers because that's simple. And also with the arm or with the leg, like I give them very many options, but I'll just demonstrate one of them. So if you have your fingers like this, and then you take the other fingers and you push down so that you're resisting. You're resisting with this and you're pushing down with that one. If it's strong, you'll be able to hold it. When it goes weak, it's going to go down. Okay. So like, for example, if I say I am a woman and I test myself, it stays strong. But if I say I am a man and I test it, it's going weak. I can't hold it. Okay. So that's just one example. There's many different ways of muscle testing. Some people are familiar with the O-ring, right? So where you put these fingers inside here and you try to separate the fingers. Okay, so that's another.
Yeah, that's how I learned it. And the reason, and correct me if I'm wrong, Teshna, your ring finger is the weakest finger on your hand.
Yes.
And I used to teach at a modeling school, and I used to tell people, like, that's how when you're putting on your eye cream and your makeup, you use your ring finger because that's the weakest finger. Right? And because you don't want to be pressing too hard under your eyes. So by doing the muscle testing with this, that's your weak finger. So it's easy to pull through.
Exactly. Yeah. So if it's strong, you'll be able to hold it. If it's weak, it will let go. So you can either like pulling it like this, or you can just put your fingers like this and try to open it like this. That's another way to do it. So there's lots of different ways, but it's the whole idea is that when you say something you're congruent with, your muscles stay on. But if you say something you're incongruent with, the muscle becomes inhibited. And it's all the muscles of the body become inhibited. So I could test this, I could test this, I could test this, I could test my arm, I could test my leg. It doesn't matter. Any muscle will be inhibited for a short period of time, like 10 to 20 seconds after you say something that you're incongruent.
And that's kind of like how, when not everybody is able to do this, when somebody is being inauthentic, it's like my spidey senses go up, and I call BS, because I know, I may not say that to them, but I know immediately that they're not being truthful. that they're lying to me.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it's just.
And so that's because your body can't lie about
Exactly.
that.
And you can pick up on it because we're all connected through the quantum field. So when you say something you're congruent with, I don't pick up any difference. So
Right.
it's the same. But if you say something you're incongruent with, I pick up that there's something not quite right. And then I can feel the difference.
Yeah. It's so true. It's so true. I love this.
Yeah.
And there's so many uses for it as well. Can you just go into some of the uses for muscle testing?
Well, I mean, depending on what you want to do, I mean, you could muscle test to see, for example, if a food agrees with you or not. But that's a whole different way of testing because there's different types of muscle testing. There's like orthopedic muscle testing, which is like if you go to an orthopedic doctor and all they do is muscle test something just to see if it's working or not. And then they grade it from 0 to 5. And that's all they do with it. They don't do anything else. And then there's what I call oracle muscle testing, which is more like getting a yes and a no response. You're looking for a yes, no, like, should I go to the store right now? And then muscle test. And people, if it's strong, they take it as a yes. If it goes weak, they take it as a no. So that's more oracle muscle testing, which is very different. Then the way that I use muscle testing in my trainings is called functional neurology muscle testing. We're not looking for a yes or a no. We're looking to see if the body is congruent with what you said or not. So we're not asking questions. We're posing statements, which is very different.
Okay.
So we're not saying, are you a woman? We're saying, I am a woman. And then test the muscle to see if you're strong when you say that, or if you're weak when you say that. It could be anything. It could be 1 + 1 is 2, and see if you're congruent with that, versus 1 + 1 is 5, and see if your muscle goes weak when you say that. Do you see? So it's anything. It doesn't matter. It could be your name. My name is Teshna. My name is Paul, right? Anything that you know you're congruent with versus something you know you're incongruent with. So you get a feel for what it's like when you are strong, when you say something congruent, and what it feels like when you're weak, when you say something incongruent, when your muscle becomes inhibited. So that's how I use it. But we can also use muscle testing to test to see if a food is agreeing with you or not. So that you would test a strong muscle, then you would put the food on the person or a supplement or something, anything like that, and then test the muscle again to see if the body remains strong or if it goes weak. If it goes weak, that usually means that food is not agreeing with you or that supplement is not something that your body likes. But if you're strong on it, that usually means your body is okay with it. So that's another way to use, another thing that you can use muscle testing for. So there's lots of different.
Love it. Love it. Love it. Love it. This has been such an incredible conversation. Is there anything else that we didn't talk about that you'd like to share with the audience before we wrap this up?
Well, the idea, I feel that this is like a brain hack. It's a way to be able to access your subconscious programming, figure out what it is, and then decide if you like it or not. If you don't like it, then I teach the technique to help you release it, change it, so that you literally have a tool to do with your brain what we do with our computers. Basically, if you have a program in your computer that you want to update, you can click on a button and then you update the program, right? And now the new program is what's going to be playing. The old one, you'll never be able to go back to. It's the same thing with this. Once you upgrade the program, it's upgraded. You can't go back to the old one. So you don't have to do it again and again and again. You do it once. That's it. That's all it takes. And then you use the muscle testing before to find out that it's there and after to make sure that it's gone. That's huge.
Yeah. It is huge. It is huge because we live in an age where we want that instant gratification. And I know, you get tired of this stuff, right? Keep coming up, right? But I love that you talked about the operating system. And I literally just interviewed another woman where she does something totally different. She deals with vibrational frequency and she's more of a coach. But we were talking about upgrading your operating system. And I was talking about how, our phones get automatic updates, or we buy a new phone to get, more features and we make sure we plug it in at night to charge it. And we pay all this attention to our phone and we don't give ourselves the same respect. So,
yeah. And with MTT, you can start doing that very specifically.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And then,
so where can people, oh, go ahead. Sorry.
The other thing I wanted to mention is that another thing I talk about in my trainings is blueprints, how we have a blueprint for everything. So we have a love blueprint, so that we learn from our parents, like whatever they did to each other and they did with us, that becomes part of our software and that becomes our blueprint. And then what we do is we look for somebody similar in our lives, and we end up with people that are very similar to our mom and dad because that's what feels familiar. But sometimes it's good, sometimes it's not so good, depending on what kind of parents you had, right? If you had loving, respectful parents that were supportive and everything, then it's great that you're looking for a mate just like that. But if you had parents that were critical and abusive and all drunks, right? Then you're going to look for somebody like that as a mate, and that may not be serving you, right? And so with knowing about those blueprints, I teach people how to discover what their love blueprint is, what their money blueprint is, what their career or health blueprints are, so that they can then start to change the parts of those blueprints that are not serving them, so they can manifest what they want instead of what they inherited from their parents.
Oh my gosh, so true. So where can people find out about the programs that you're offering and the trainings that you do?
Right. So they can go on my website, drteshna.com, which is just DR for Dr. Teshna, TESHNA.com. So you go on my website and everything is in there. I also do free group sessions on Sundays where I lead people through releasing stress about something that's stressing them out in their lives. And the week after, I do a forgiveness call where I help people forgive someone that they haven't been able to forgive. And I do it as a group. So I figured out ways of working one on many, which is great. So, and I do that every Sunday. It's free. Anybody can join. And that way you can feel it for yourself. Because to me, the proof is in the pudding. If you experience it, then you know it's real because you can feel it. And you can see that everybody else on the call is feeling it. So it's very powerful. And then I also teach a 1-day MTT immersion for free as well, where I teach more the tapping sequence that I do with MTT. And then I have the 3-day training, and I also have a membership for people who really want to get into it. And we meet every week and we clear things and answer questions and coach them into how to do it and everything. It's a lot of fun.
Oh my gosh, I love it. And folks, checking out the show notes, Teshna's Instagram, Facebook it will be in there, and her website as well. So you can check those out. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining me today. This is such amazing information. And just a reminder to the audience, the way things are today, they don't have to be that way. There are tools out there to really make a difference in your life. Check it out. Thank you so much, Teshna.
Thank you for having me.
And thank you, everyone.
Great. Nice talking with you.
Thank you, everyone, for listening today. And I hope that you and your family are healthy and safe, and that your lives are filled with peace, joy, and happiness. Take care, everyone.
Take care. Bye-bye.